Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app, on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the Five Reasons YouTube channel. I'm a little bit insecure about this because I got mocked on a creator video about the way I do this. I'm going to try to do this a little bit differently. Subscribe to Off the Floor. The link is in the description. $2.99 per month. You can make fun of me there. No, you also get access to 10 different channels, plus the stage shows. Okay, I'll do it. The place for the most heat conversation, information, consternation, celebration. And today on social media of me, there was an obliteration. Check it out. It's Off the Floor, link right here in the description. Also, check out Prize Picks. That is our daily fantasy sponsor. Use the code 5FIVE. Put down $5. You get $50 to play right away. Prize Picks allows you to play in the state of Florida, allows you to play up to 6 players together, allows you to play across the sports spectrum. So give it a shot. Lots to go on in the NBA playoffs. Use the code FIVE. Get $50 to play. And now, today's episode.
Mercy, luxurious, Heat Nation, yeah, Mercy and Lago, down to Biscayne, yeah, five on the floor, ride for my dogs, where here's the thing, you can check the score, hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs, down to Biscayne. Kept the floor playing, got it all band. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the Five Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, welcome back to Five on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick on 5 Reasons Sports. And back to the show, we've got our guy, Bryan Fonseca. You can follow him at Bryan Fonseca NY, where you can also get, in addition to basketball, a whole bunch of boxing stuff as well. Bryan, of course, based in New York. We don't hold it against him. I'm from New York, too, so, I mean, it's what it is all. Although, I don't know. How many years? I haven't lived in New York. I mean, I went to grad school in New York, but I haven't lived in New York for 40 years. Like, I don't know if I still count. Am I disowned at this point? Pretty much.
I mean, how long were you there for?
I mean, the first 12 and a half years of my life, and then went back.
That's longer than Carmelo Anthony. That's longer than Carmelo Anthony, so I think you're fine.
That's longer than Mikal Bridges is going to be there too. Even though he was the Nets prior to that. So make sure you check out all of the episodes. We're doing a lot of content considering there are no Heat games. Episode I did with Brady. We're doing an off-season series, internal and external. So Brady and I got into Davion Mitchell. You should check that one out. There's a Kevin Durant episode up. There's an episode about Jimmy Butler, now in the second round of the playoffs. And now, by the way, he's a number one again, at least for the next week or so with Steph Curry out. Warriors, as we're speaking, you're up 1-0 in that series. I don't know when you'll actually be listening to this episode. And then additionally, we did an episode on John Morant, but also a broader conversation we had with our old friend Mike Wallace about Turner was on that one as well. And Michael, who covers them for covers the Grizzlies for the Memphis Commercial Appeal, about sort of the similarities between the positioning of where the Grizzlies are and where the Heat are. And that's going to kind of lead to this conversation. So Bryan and I tend to be a little long-winded when we do this stuff, especially on his channel. So we're going to split this into 2 episodes. But he essentially came to me with an idea. And his idea, I think, is actually embraced by some Heat fans, although I think the organization itself...
They will not do it.
Will not do it. So, but go with your idea, Bryan, because I don't think it's crazy. I just don't think it's something that would actually happen.
And as you know, I cover the NBA as a whole, so I try to have my pulse. I never say my pulse, and I'll never say it again, on things going on in the league, just like league-wide. And in just looking ahead at where the Eastern Conference is right now, looking ahead at where it's going to be next season, the Heat having their own draft pick now that they lost the pick in that, deal, and they made the play-in, but they have their pick for next year. I think for a season, they should punt. I'm not saying dramatically, like just strip everything down. There's a way to do this creatively, but in looking ahead at Cleveland being able to run it back next year, and they'll be better. They're banged up right now is the only reason they're down 2-0 in the series against Indiana. Boston, there's reports about them potentially having to move on from a couple people, but at the end of the day, it's like, I don't know if they're going to do that this year. They'll have to trade, with somebody who doesn't want to take back a ton of space and all these different things. And it's like Cleveland, Boston, New York, Indiana, in the short of it, they'll be back. Detroit's going to be better. Orlando's going to be better. And there are other teams who will want to make the playoffs like Chicago and Toronto. And it's like, if you're Miami, you're staring at the play-in again. Why bother?
Why bother? You can't put that on a T-shirt. It's a little different than winning or misery.
There's more to it than that. Like, there's actually there's a fun, quick rebuild component to this, which is I get that's it. Why. Yeah.
I want to get to the specifics of what you want to do here. So we always start with this premise: the Heat don't tank. They suck at it. That's what they'll tell you. They won't do it. They are irrational, right? Isn't that the word that Spo used a few times?
Yes.
So that's not going to happen. The only time that they really technically tanked, I guess, would be the 07-08 season, but it didn't start that way. They were trying to compete, and then everybody got hurt, and then they were playing the entire D-League All-Stars. At a time, by the way, where because Steve Powell's in the organization now, but at a time where they weren't developing players the way they are now. So out of that particular league. So that's really the only time they've really done it. I mean, 02-03, they were just young. They had Karan. They refused to even lose the last game on purpose. I wrote a column on the morning for the Sun Sentinel on the morning that they were playing in Toronto on the last day of the season, saying they should drop the game. And I've never gotten a phone call so fast from them. We don't do that. And the reason I thought they should drop the game was because they could have moved up to 4. As it turned out, they got 5. They would have taken Bosch at 4. They ended up getting Dwayne at 5. They ended up with both of them later on. So they'll throw at you the karma of the basketball gods and all that kind of stuff. We don't tank. We don't cheat the process. I'm sorry, I don't want to use that word because they're not going to do the process. But they everything is the hard way, right? So they're not going to do this. So just Bryan, just tell me your irrelevant suggestion, because there's no way that this is actually going to happen. How would you go about doing this without explicitly tanking?
So in looking at their contract situation, we obviously know the Hero extension potentially looms for what could be 3 years, $150 million if it's a max. I don't think they're going to do that. I don't think they're going to extend him now, and I don't think they're going to give him a max either. But I do think there's a future where he is extended at a pretty big number, which would eat up a significant part of your salary cap. Could be anywhere between, it depends on the structure of the deal, but could be anywhere between 20 and like 25, maybe even more of a percentage than that in the future. Bam right now is not taking up a ton of your cap because his extension actually hasn't kicked in, and it won't until 26, 27. That's when he gets north of 50 million, and that's taking up 30% of your cap. So if you're going to tie basically, I don't know, more than 50%, call it closer to 60% maybe, but somewhere, let's say 55% actually of your cap in Bam and Tyler Hero after a Hero extension, it's like the other 45%. What's happening there? So and next year, Hero is on the books, Bam is on the books, so combined they're going to take 44% of your cap. And Andrew Wiggins is on the book, so that's 18% of your cap. So almost 2/3 of your team is right there. And then not to mention Terry Rozier, and Duncan Robinson's big number, which you still have to find a taker if you're going to move off him because it's a partial guarantee. But that doesn't mean another team's going to be like, oh, yeah, we'll absolutely take Duncan Robinson. They might if they need a shooter, and teams need shooting, but that's part of it. So I think you need to not strip it down totally, because I think Bam is the piece you keep. I'm not sure who wants Tyler Hero, not from the standpoint of like he's a bad player, but who's going to rush to like, okay, we'll trade for him and then extend him, because that's kind of what you need to find, is a team willing to do that. Greg has floated out a couple teams. That's more private. So we're not gonna like report that here, but
no, but he and I have similar teams on that. I think there is a market there.
Well, that's up to them to find, but I'd be looking at just the future of this, and to me, it's like next year I go into the season with Bam and a bunch of young dudes. I would extend Davion Mitchell, obviously not at a huge number. I think in the neighborhood of 3 for 30, 3 for 33, mid-level exception type of deal, something like that. And hopefully his agent doesn't, get a massive offer sheet from the Nets, who there's a cross-representation piece to that, because the Nets have 3 players who have the same representation as Davion Mitchell. So I could see the agent going to Sean Marks and being like, hey, you have all this space. Could you get my guy to sign a 3 for $40 million offer sheet and see what the Heat do? Not that Sean Marks would do it, but Sean Marks has absolutely, you guys know this, he's done the restricted free agency thing in the past. Mm-hmm. And now the owner is not yelling big three, big three, big three. So Sean Marks could actually be a GM, and Sean Marks is actually a really good GM when he's allowed to be a GM. And just looking at the rest of the salary structures here, and Kyle Anderson making an expiring $9 million, you could not an expiring $9 million. He has $9 million, then 9.6 after, but that's a short-term contract. Like, there are deals you could find takers for. I'm not sure what you're going to get back. That's for part 2, because we know that if we mention a bunch of deals, they're not going to do them, because the Heat never do what we think they should do, for better and for worse. But ultimately, I would run it back, quote unquote, with only just Bam and a bunch of kids. Khalil Ware, I don't think you're going to sell Jaime Jaquez Lowe. Nikola Jovic for now is a keeper. Davion Mitchell, you should keep him. Tyler Hero TBD. I think see what you could get. But be open-minded to the fact that, hey, Bam and Hero probably just get you back into the play-in. And with everyone else either staying the same who's above you or improving, like Orlando jumped you, Detroit jumped you. Those are 2 teams that can do stuff in the offseason. I think the Heat should look, and by the way, Toronto wants to make the playoffs. Like, they have a lot of money tied in, up into their roster.
Ingram. Yeah.
Chicago looked good toward the end of the season. You beat them in the play-in, but Chicago, I think, could be a better team next year. Atlanta with Trae Young, don't know what they're going to do yet, but Trae Young has an extension question. If they extend Trae Young, they're obviously going to try to build around Trae Young. And you have your own pick for once. And not to mention Philadelphia. I don't know what they're going to do, but they seem to, want to be ambitious. It's like you have your own pick for a year. So I would legitimately do Bam and kids, Bam play until February. We sit you with a bullshit injury after the All-Star break. And then that's when you see like a lot of Kashad Johnson, Pele Larson, and guys of that nature. But that's what I would do for a year, because the year after, isn't this all about 2026? That's when you're going to have cap space. That's when you're going to be able to like have like actual draft capital in a different way, because like now you're going to have more draft capital to play with. You're going to have a pick that's in the lottery, and who knows what that can turn out to be. Like, all these different things sort of point in your favor, instead of just trying your best, unless you're going to do something dramatic to improve your roster this year. And I don't see the pathways to getting that done without maybe getting Giannis, and even that's not a perfect situation.
All right, a lot to digest there. I let you go in part because it's all interesting, and also because they're running fire alarm drills in my building, which I thought had finished. So I'll try to get in a couple of thoughts here, and then we'll turn it back over to you real quick, and hopefully this is just a drill here. The Davion Mitchell thing you said about his agent is interesting. I did not know that, so that is something to monitor here. It's funny, the Nets were the team way back, different ownership, that signed Tyler Johnson to that offer sheet that the Heat mistakenly matched, the one with the poison pill in it, all the way back in 2016. There's some history. There's also a relationship between ownership between the Nets and the Heat. So again, that's an interesting one to just kind of look at. As far as what you're saying here, I mean, in Hero, Greg and I have talked about this. We've mentioned it. Just off the top of my head, I mean, I think Detroit could use him. I think Orlando could use him. I think there are teams in the Eastern Conference that he would make better. And if the Heat are not intending to extend him at a number he's going to be comfortable with, whether it's this year, which I don't think is going to happen, or next year, then it is something that you have to look at. I just think it gets, and I understand what you're saying about the league. It's not just the East. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen with OKC here in the postseason against Denver. I feel like they've caught the wrong matchup. But when you're talking about a team with that kind of talent that has that many picks, and there's the alarm going off as we speak. I think I tried every coffee shop and stuff.
Well, I could pick up a little bit, but like to what you're saying, it's like with OKC, they're a team to watch, because like, if Miami's going to go after Kevin Durant, I think if OKC loses to Denver, they're going to do something. They have to do something. You can't just keep all the draft capital. I mean, you can, because they've done that before. But you should actually be ambitious and look to do something. Houston is going to try to do something as well. Don't know what. Like Kevin Durant's name will be out there. Devin Booker supposedly like they want to keep. He wants to stay, but like you just never know. Giannis is obviously a big name, and there are a bunch of others we already mentioned. Trae Young. I think anyone on the Sacramento Kings, any of their not big three, but lukewarm three, like could be had, so to speak. And the agent I'm referring to, by the way, is Thaddeus Foucher, who like he is one of Davion Mitchell has 2 listed agents. He has Davion Mitchell, but also from the Nets, and also Kyle Anderson, by the way, but also from the Nets, Trendon Watford, Maxwell Lewis, DeAnthony Melton, also has DeAndre Hunter, Evan Mobley, Patrick Williams. So he got Patrick Williams that contract. And it's like, hey, if he got Patrick Williams that, like who knows?
Right, can he guess? right. Because Patrick Williams hasn't showed a whole lot. All right, on the other side is I want to hold that thought here because we're going to get into what they could do maybe on the next pod. But in the last 5 minutes that we have on this one, I want to get to the idea of whether or not this is something, not just whether the Heat would do, I'll touch on that, but whether or not the Heat fan would tolerate it. And I say that because I have said on podcasts that they won't, and then I'm getting a lot of pushback on off the floor about this, that I'm sort of underestimating Heat fans' tolerance for that based on what we just saw, which is this was garbage in the playoffs. And so they're more tolerant maybe of a rebuild than they would have been. Again, but we'll touch on it on the other side of this. All right, before we do though, see, there you go. It's the alarm. You got to reach out to Real Estate Shop. Find them at Real Estate Shop with 2 P's and an E, FL.com. Javier, Amanda, they're great. They're a married couple that really knows a lot about real estate. That's really what it's about. Broward County, but they also service Dade County. Why does it have to be so loud? Also service Dade County, Palm Beach County as well. You can also find them at the Fort Lauderdale Realtor on Instagram. Everything that they do, they pretty much document their open houses all the time. I see them in Pines. I see them in East Lauderdale, all over the place. And Javier, they're both Heat fans, but Javier has been on with us many times. Very knowledgeable Heat fan. He can be part of our network. He's probably better at this than I am. So check them out. Real Estate Shop, FL.com, the Fort Lauderdale Realtor on IG. All right. So I'm going to try to get this in before it buzzes on me again. This is a fickle sports town, okay? And the Heat have had very short valleys, okay? And like has not lasted very long. It's like, Zoe gets sick, okay? He leaves. 2001, they bring in a bunch of old, vets on 1-year contracts, like mercenaries. 2002, they draft Karan. 2003, they get Dwayne. They're right back up. They end up getting Shaq. There have not been these kind of down periods. Even that period that was sort of middling, I call them the Rodney Magruder years. You had in there the 16-17 season where they went 30-11. You did have a playoff appearance against Philadelphia. Like, this is not an organization that stays down. They're not Sacramento, what Sacramento has been in the past. They're not Charlotte. And Heat fans are spoiled as F. I mean, they are. Like, they just are. And particularly those the younger contingent. Now I'm always sort of corrected on this and said that I spend too much time on Twitter and social media with the kids. And if I was talking to more of the people who actually go to the games, okay, who are closer to my age, that they would be more comfortable with a rebuild, even though, again, we're all closer to leaving this earth when we get to my age. What do you think? Do you think, I mean, you're in New York. In New York, like, the Knicks were awful forever, right? Like, and they're like a marquee franchise, are supposed to be. They're held up as such, even though they're basically the Dolphins in terms of the last time that they've won anything, and Marino and Ewing and all the parallels of that. Like, in New York, they don't tolerate it that long. In Miami, though, they just find other things to do. Like, how long is this valley going to be, Brian?
I think fans want a plan in general, and I think to bring it to the Knicks, a lot of the discontent up here was there was no plan. It was like, all right, Alexi Shved, Lou Amundsen, Lance Thomas, like, what's actually going on here? And then once they got RJ Barrett and it looked like there was an actual plan to rebuild, and then they became a playoff team pretty quickly, not because of RJ Barrett, but, they had a plan. Like, people were shitting on them when they got Julius Randle in free agency because the Nets stole like Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, DeAndre Jordan. And we've seen what's happened since. Ultimately, like, they've had a plan, and they've started to win. With the Heat, I think Heat fans would buy into a youth movement if there's a plan. And I think they'll buy into a rebuild if there's an actual commitment to a rebuild. I think what Heat fans are pissed off about in my interactions with them, and you can speak to this too, is the team thinking that they're better than they are, that they think they can compete with Boston now, that they think they can compete with Cleveland now, that they think they could compete even with the Knicks and the Pacers right now, when they would lose the playoff series to any one of those teams. They would lose the playoff series probably to Orlando right now as well. And Detroit, given how they played against the Knicks, like that's at least a discussion. And Detroit, they've had some success against them as Cade has blossomed into what he is. And Heat fans look at, and you could say, whether or not it's because they're spoiled, but they look at other teams and like, why don't they have a Paolo Banchero? Why don't they have a Cade Cunningham? And like, it takes a while, and the Heat are never bad enough to get one of those guys. Like, the best they've done as far as the draft goes is Bam and Hero in recent years. And those were late lottery picks. And ultimately, it's like, if you do, hey, we're going to rebuild for a year or retool, and it's going to be like a youth movement. It's going to be Bam in a youth movement, or maybe even Bam Hero in a youth movement. And it's going to be that. And then it's not like, oh, Bam, Hero, and Kevin Durant. I think Kevin Durant will put butts in the seats and he'd be a draw. But ultimately, if you get Kevin Durant, unless it's not for much, what is that doing for your organization? Like, is Kevin Durant bringing you to beat Boston or beat Cleveland or beat any of the teams that we're talking about at the top of the East, like that top four? Like, Kevin Durant makes you more competitive, but he's also on a 1-year deal. And I think that's what people are tired of. So now that you have the Jimmy Butler era over with, and with Jimmy Butler gone, it's like you don't have to actually like play like you're a team at the end of the road here. Like, you don't have to necessarily go for it in that way. Bam is still young. Like, I know he's not, he's fully formed, some people say, or whatever the case may be. Like, that's a debate we could have, but he is in year 8, but he's only in his like mid to late 20s at this point. He's still a young dude that is in or entering the prime of his career. I would say in his prime right now. Though he didn't have the best regular season, I think he'll have a better season next year now that all the Jimmy shit is done, because I think that was weighing on him more than anybody else. But if you sell to fans, I think, this is just my guess, maybe I'm wrong, but if you sell to fans, hey, this is going to be a rebuild for a year, we're not going to go and give up too much to cripple the future and get the veteran pieces. Like, now's not the time to cripple your future because you're just not good enough. You're just not good enough. And you also don't have like a prime star who's like 33, 34, 35 years old. You have it right in front of you to actually do this a different way for once. And it could only be for one season. And then next year, it's like you have more draft capital. You have like an actually flexible financial situation that you can work around as some parts move, some contracts come off the books and what have you. Like, there's an actual pathway to being really good quickly in a year from now. But right now, it doesn't look like there's a pathway to doing that. So why kid yourself?
Well, I know. I think that's fair. And I think, again, it gets into not being irrational about where you're at. And I think when, Pat made a comment that even without Jimmy or, that they could still compete with Boston, it's like, okay, fans at this point are rolling their eyes at that stuff. There is also the real life circumstance that Pat's 80. Now, he's not the day-to-day driving force anymore. People don't really realize that. He hasn't even had final say in let's just put it this way. Nick Harrison's had final say since 2011, and they've had success during that period of time. They have won championships. They've been to finals, but it's more of a collaborative in the front office now. But Pat is still, for the time being, at least the face. And that is why it's going to be an interesting dichotomy if they did go this direction, kind of how it's framed. And we're waiting for Riley to speak to the media. My understanding is it's going to happen relatively soon. And so I'm curious to see if he will be open to this direction, because this feels more like a direction for an organization with Spo in charge, and to go that way. And I think in the next episode of this, what we'll talk about is how you actually execute this. Okay.
Yes.
And where you go. So let's get some ideas together on that. We'll do a second part of this podcast. And I think it is, look, I think theoretically, practically, it makes sense. You talk about the assets, what you have and all that. Shortcutting this with Kevin Durant, unless you're getting him basically for Wiggins and a first and filler, like it doesn't make a lot of sense on the surface. And I don't even think that's going to be available to them, because I think Houston losing their series is probably going to compel them to move some of their young players to get to the next step faster, particularly if Golden State advances with Jimmy. And I think what you're going to, without Steph playing a lot of the series, and I think more teams are going to be like, all right, you know what? We're reasonably close, but we're not there. But if we can get a Jimmy-like player, a Durant-like player for a short period of time, and maybe we have to eat it contract-wise on a short extension, we'll do it. So I think we could see the league moving a little bit more that direction, although the counter to that is Indiana hasn't really had to do any of that stuff. I mean, Siakam, they went out and traded for him, but he was a more player entering his prime. So I want to go through the execution of how they do this. I just don't think they'll do it.
Me neither. And you mentioned Durant. The big part of this is also like if Denver beats OKC, I don't know if they will, but if Denver beats OKC, then I think OKC has to look at potential reunion. Like, why not?
I would look at that.
You know what I mean? And this is part of it too, because the Heat could exhaust everything that they want to do. And look, I still think the world of their organization and their front office. Like, I think they're awesome, they're elite, and all these different things. Though questions have been presented about the front office in recent years, and I think the last couple of years, and I think they're fair. But I still trust them more than most other organizations at this point. That said, your offers for Durant, like the hypothetical offers for Durant and for Giannis and for whomever, they're going to be beat. They're going to be beaten. Like, same thing with Trey Young, even, and I have questions about that potential fit.
And they don't like Trey Young.
They're going to be. That's the other thing. It's like you're going to try these avenues, and they're going to be beaten. Like you're legitimately stuck in the middle, and you're right there. You could have a get out of jail free card for a season. Right. Before making a real run into.
Well, Brian, the other part
by the way, and the other part of this, and we'll talk about like the specifics, but the other part of this is a year from now. That's when Boston might really have to be like, all right, because this is why ownership is selling. Oh, that's why they're not going to be able to keep that team together. And Drew Holiday is going to be owner.
I think Porzingis and Holiday would be the two that would go.
And look, the Knicks are going to have a more difficult. The Knicks are going to have a more difficult financial situation. Miles Turner's a free agent this season. Like all these different factors, like I feel like if you just wait it out a year and, Pat Riley just keep staying in the gym, remain healthy, see this through, then I think there are some things that they could do a year from now when they're more flexible.
Well, and I also think one other thing to consider here is my understanding is that they've done fine on ticket sales for next year. So that's not the issue. It's
they're always top 10 in attendance or whatever it is.
Yeah. It's just the enthusiasm. The fan base that I deal with is pretty downcast right now. I think that the biggest point of this, and again, we'll save all of what they could do specifically for the next episode, is that the Jimmy blow up in retrospect may turn out to be a positive because it forced them into a direction.
Yes.
Now let's see if they stay on that path. I know, and I've been told this by more than one person. They don't want to manage aging stars anymore. They're out of that game. Now, I don't know if Durant is the exception because of the relationship that he's developed with Spo, the affection that he has for Bam, and the fact that he is still elite. Like, I was looking at Durant's numbers, and he's not the same finisher that he was. He doesn't go to the rim quite as much. He's not the same defender that he was. But honestly, you look at his numbers, like he is playing the way he's played his entire career. I mean, he is still elite. It's just how much is he going to be on the floor? I think as far as managing him, the one benefit is, even though I know that he gets a lot of guff for it's a terrible word. That's an old man word, but he gets a lot of bleep. Okay. For, not winning without Steph and all the rest of this stuff and there's big threes falling apart, but really, all KD wants to do is hoop, play video games, and go back at people on Twitter. Like, this is, I don't think he's problematic behind the scenes the way that Jimmy was problematic behind the scenes. So it's a little bit of a different deal there, but I want to save all the other stuff for the next episode. So this was part one. Should the Heat just punt on this year, just drop kick it into the 10th row, or, is it just not possible for them to do that as an organization, or does it not make sense in terms of how they would actually be able to execute it? So we'll get to that last part on the next episode. So we appreciate Brian joining. Follow me at Bryan Fonseca NY. And of course, as soon as I'm finishing the podcast, there's no alarm anymore. Have a good one, everybody.